My name's Ryan, and this is my Miata. I've got a 91 Miata with a 1.8 out of a 97, and I've got the turbo kit off of a '04 Mazda Speed. So I'm going to convert this thing over to turbo, and thanks for watching. And if you guys like what you see, or if you watch my other videos, don't hesitate to subscribe. I'd like more followers. So anyway, hopefully you learned something, and we'll get on it. Get in here and start doing a teardown on this thing so we can get on with the turbo builds. Don't you love my cold air intake? Because this is actually a functioning cowl. So we've tried that, and it actually definitely is cooler than the air that it was picking up before. I don't know if we'll be able to retain that after we put the turbo on.
So why would you assume the people in the president's base, boy, the idea that you can come to the United States from people from Haiti or people from Africa, so that doesn't make the idea that the White House has in the past, just a couple of weeks ago, tried to push back on the idea that the president has made.
This, I forget, it's like a, I forget. It's like a mass airflow sensor, but it's definitely different than a modern one. But it's off an RX-7. Originally, we had the factory one on this, and read up some articles on flying Miata about doing a cold air intake and changing over to this RX-7. Mass airflow sensor, and it actually made a big difference on higher RPMs. It was noticeable. But we're not going to be using that anymore. There we go. Okay, let's see. I think we'll probably go with this heat shield next, and hopefully get some penetrating oil on the exhaust manifold gasket or bolts. It shouldn't be too bad because, well, it's probably been 2 years, but we had all this off when we pulled the motor and put a new oil pump in to get the oil pressure back up. So I don't know if the audio is going to be better on this video than the previous ones I've done, but I was reading up on it and found a video app for recording video that allows you to use any Bluetooth you might have. So I'm doing this with a Bluetooth headset to see if it actually is any better for audio. I'll probably let this thing sit overnight or until the next time I have time to mess with it. Let's see, one more there. Yeah, so we'll see if these Beats headphones work better for getting some audio to you guys so it sounds cleaner and easier for you to hear. Alright, so at this point we've got the heat shield off, mass airflow sensor. Eventually we're going to have to take the bumper off. I don't know if I'll bother taking that off at this point. If you do one of these, after researching it a little bit, I don't know if you can see this in the video, but let me see if I can zoom in. Okay, so this piece right here is the outlet for the cooling, and you can imagine the turbo and all that's going to be sitting right here. And on a Mazda Speed Miata, this output if I remember correctly from what I've seen, it comes down or it turns away from this area because the turbo is going to sit like probably about right here. So what we're going to have to do is cut this, rotate it down so this pipe or this tube hose that hooks up picks up down below so that it'll have room for the turbo. So we'll have to do a little bit of custom stuff there. Okay, next I think I'll start taking those bolts off for the front bumper. Now, I've never taken it off before, but it looks like it's probably pretty straightforward, just a bunch of 10mm bolts. Loose first and then get my impact gun and take them all off. There is 6 bolts across the top of the bumper, and there's 2 back on the wheel well area. And then after crawling around under there looking to see where else it attaches, it looks like to me that it's going to require me pulling the wheels off and the fender liners to get up into this area here on the side. There's 2 bolts on each side. And then I think after that, it's probably going to be able to come off. So I'm going to get those tires and wheels off and attack it from the inside the wheel well and see what happens. Okay, I got the wheels off and I've already got the bolts off one side of the bumper. If you do this, if you need to take your bumper off for some reason, it's pretty straightforward. You actually don't need to pull the fender liner entirely. If you pull it back, I don't know if I can get this light up in there, but there's a bolt right here and a bolt right here. There's 2 of them, and that's the other 2. So that makes it so we're up to 10 bolts that hold the bumper on right now. 10, 6, 10, nope, 12, because there's also a hanger that goes on both sides that ties in this section right here. Okay, so I finally got all the bolts out. There's 6, 3 on this side, 3 on this side. Over here in the corner, there's 1 on each side. Now I should mention this isn't a factory bumper, so it may be slightly different on an OEM bumper. Then back up in this area where I pulled the splash guard out of the way, there's 2 on each side there. So we've got 8, 10, 12, and then there was 3 across the bottom edge of the bumper here. And then you have to take the bumper cover off as well that it attaches to right in that same general area. And then on this, these are our turn signals, so obviously I had to remove that as well. But I think it's ready to come off. Looks like everything is disconnected. Yay! And yes, another bag of bolts labeled. Just did a little test fit here to see if the intercooler, which is right there, is going to fit, and it does. And I don't have to remove our air horn. I thought that was probably going to have to come out of the way. So that's a plus. Intercooler's a pretty straightforward application. It will be very interesting to see if I have all the parts, because this is secondhand stuff that was pulled off a car, and he said it was all there, but we're going to find out, aren't we? Okay, so for today I have disconnected the outlet line from the cooling system, and drained it all out, disconnected the exhaust, the wideband O2 sensor for the air fuel mixture, and now I'm going to pull the header off and hopefully the exhaust will all come out with it. Oh, that was tight. if we can get it loose. Let's see. One more thing. One more bolt to take off. This little bugger back here, right there, is a tough one to get to. But it goes to, I think it's the EGR valve. And after finagling with it for a while, I finally got it loose. So get that off the rest of the way, and then this thing's coming out. Okay, second attempt. See if I can get lucky and all to come out in one piece. That was kind of a pain in the butt to get that last bolt off the bottom there, but exhaust manifold is off, so that's a good start. I just need to pull that exhaust through or up from the bottom, I'm not sure. Voila! Sweet! Now we can test fit the turbo and stuff. Probably get on that tomorrow. Okay, coming in today to kind of mock up the exhaust manifold and the turbo and all that on this. So we'll see how it goes. There's a lot of unknowns on this one, so we'll see how everything lines up. And if you do a flying Miata kit, this line right here, they recommend bending it back towards the firewall. So what I'm going to do now is just basically grab the Mazda Speed Miata turbo, manifold, and turbo and all that, and kind of put it up on here and get an idea of what needs to go where and if anything needs to change, since it's not a flying Miata kit. So we'll see how it goes. Okay. So this is the coolant, or not coolant, yeah, it's the heater line that goes into the cab and heats the vehicle. But this is the part where they said that you probably have to bend it with a flying Miata kit. I'm hoping that this will fit, since this is a Mazda Speed turbo, manifold, and everything. I know it's kind of a waste of time to do it this way. You could do the same thing with a with like a flying Miata kit or a big turbo kit. But the deal was too good to pass up, and I've got the time. I'm sure eventually we'll probably get that thing out of the way. What's it hung up on there? Ah, I see. But anyway, I'm sure one day we'll probably take all this off and put a turbo kit on, a different one. Okay, wouldn't that be funny if it didn't fit at all? So yeah, that looks like, oh yeah, sweet. Yeah, looks like it clears everything, because that'll be down here. Nice. Well, that's a good sign, because that should be, once it's all mounted on there, find that stud. Okay, should be something like that. So yeah, looks like it'll be out of the way so we can get the intake on there. One thing I'm aware of on this, the Mazda Speed, the outlet pipe is different than this. This elbow is further back here, and it doesn't dump in the same direction, so it's slightly off. So what we're going to have to do is cut this and then rotate it, maybe even make it a little shorter, and then weld it back together to get the clearance for the turbo. I'll try to show you here real quick. I don't know how well you can see this in the video. I'm trying to position everything to where you can, but so like I said, this is the outlet of the motor as far as the cooling line, and this is the pipe that goes and heats the interior, and they come together right here, bolt up. But as you can see, this elbow, I left it on here so I could actually kind of do a dry run and see what I'm going to run into. But this elbow needs to be cut and rotated down out of the way so it doesn't interfere with this turbo inlet. So that's one thing we will definitely have to address. I've looked, and it's not available if you want to just go buy one from Mazda. They don't sell these for a Mazda Speed anymore, so, and the stock has been depleted. So you pretty much either need to find one that's used or modify the one you have. So we're going to go with the modification. So that looks like it's gonna work, because we'll be able to retain this pipe. I was kind of worried about that and having to fab it up. Okay, now that I know that that's gonna work, I am going to pull this off and give it a thorough cleaning before I install it. And we'll kind of see how everything goes around after that. Okay, hopefully the playoff game isn't too loud. So I'm going to start running the piping for the intercooler. I'm going to start at the throttle body and take it from there. Now, this is a flying Miata aftermarket part, and basically the factory OEM stuff can't handle the boost, and if you run it really hard, this pops off apparently. So it's supposed to go right here, and this hose and this radiator are all aftermarket. This is a bigger radiator, which makes a big difference as far as keeping the cooling down. And no matter what position, even trimming this hose up and trying to tie it in closer, as you can see, if I put this in the spot it's supposed to be, get that out of the way. Hopefully you guys can see that. But this oversized radiator runs into a situation here. So I went to a local, it's called Motorsport here in Salt Lake, and they have a lot of different parts. And I got a nice elbow, go there, and that'll make it so I can get the plug on the side here, and the blow-off valve will be on the left, and then we'll chase the rest of it down. It should work out, but we'll find out here in a minute. I'm going to mock it up and see. All right. We're literally mocking this all up, so. All right. Something like that. Okay. It looks like this hose is going to work out all right with this elbow. And the tubing and everything that came with this flying Miata inlet tube seems to work out pretty good. I think it'll probably have to sit about like that to have the blow-off valve clear the throttle. We'll see when we get one of those on there. And then down below here, I don't know if you can see that in this video, but so we have I think it's a flying Miata, actually a sway bar bracket that's on this thing, so, or maybe it's race beat. That's what it is, it's race beat. Anyway, I think this tube originally, if it were to go straight down, would come right into that sway bar area, so it just, after modifying this, it seems to make its way around below on the bottom. I'll go down there and get the next tube and go from that to the intercooler. Okay, so we got the pipe from the intercooler going up to the throttle body. And then now I'm going to work on the pipe going from the turbo to the intercooler. Now, from the factory, it has, where is it? This piece. It's a big old ugly thing. And it connects there, and then this pipe goes to the air cleaner. And I don't think I'm actually going to use this. I'm just going to probably go with this if I don't just replace this altogether. Because since this is an NA Miata, we've got a headlight here that pops up. The MSM Miata, this comes out and turns and goes down right here where this headlight is. So I'm going to take it down here and around the radiator to the front. So we'll see how that goes. I'm going to try it out right now and see what I get. Okay. So I cut the other side off this, so it's just loose in one piece. I don't see why I would need to replace the OEM material here. And talking to the local sports shop, they said that the smaller the tubing is all the way to the intercooler, the better. So I'm going to try to retain this small stuff because it is small. I know it's a small turbo, and we'll take that and figure out how to do it. Looks like I probably can cut this down and shorten that elbow up and turn it and head down there. So we'll take it to the next step. Okay, I cut down the factory elbow. It was right here. So that should work out. Something like this. Kind of shoot it down there towards the intercooler. Alright, I kind of have it mocked up where I think it'll go. So this is an aftermarket piece. I used the factory piece here, cut the bracket off that attached it to the intake piece that we won't be using. And that is pretty damn close to how it's going to go. So that brings it down to the bottom. And I'll just have to make it from there to the intercooler. Okay, so this is the bottom, obviously, on the turbo to intake or intercooler side, and this is that hose I just connected. So I'm just going to try to come up with something to make a U-turn to get over to that intercooler. Okay, down on the bottom, I disconnected this cooling line that comes from the radiator. I'm pretty sure this won't be able to be retained, but this is the intercooler, or the piping coming from the turbo, and we have to loop it around to here. So what I picked up was this U-pipe. I just am going to cut it to size. I think it's going to be right about there. And that should give us a nice elbow or bend around there to get to the intercooler and retain that small size. Alright, so that is the turbo down pipe to the intercooler, which joins up here, goes to the intercooler, and I have the piping all set up for this side. I just need to put it back on and mock it up. Let's see how it goes. So yeah, that worked out good. So we've got that tube coming in to the intercooler, coming out, going up to the throttle body. So that's one step down. One more thing out of the way and we'll get on with the rest. So from the throttle body across to the turbo. Yay. Okay, so got a chance to work on it again, so I'm back. This stock piece here that I'm using, with the piping that I have running down below, this pipe coming up here was too long, so I took about 4 inches out of the middle of it. Whoops, put that down there. And I need to get it in this position because it was sitting up way too high. Try to get it something a little more stock, or like you might want to see it. So that'll go in down lower. What that brought me to is I need to put a bead roll on this. And I was looking into how to do it and everything on YouTube, and people have got all different ways, but a common one is a tool like this, and they cut this off so that the crimp setting down below is accessible. But this is an older one, and it just happens to look like it works perfect. So I will show a little test here. So all you have to do is put the pipe on all the way in. Make sure you got this going the right way so you don't make an indentation like I just about did. But then you just give it a little squeeze, squeeze, squeeze. Seems to be, I don't know, this is only like my 5th or 6th time squeezing this, but as near as I can tell, it moves pretty quick. And if you do overlapping, you end up with, you know, a pretty decent bead, and then I'll probably just take some sandpaper to it to clean up the edge. So I'm going to put a bead on both of these, and then I have a fitting around here somewhere to put them together with. So that's what I will do next. Okay. Well, hopefully this will work out, and I don't have to go get another piece of pipe, but I think it will. So I'll do it over this dark area so maybe you can see it a little better. Seems like maybe just shy of overlapping, I mean, or barely overlapping strokes with each time you crimp it might give you the nicest, smoothest finish. But this older tool, I've had this thing for like 20 years. I didn't want to cut the tip off of it. I was going to go buy one, but then I was looking at it and I'm like, it looks like it probably will work just the way it is. So you can kind of see it in the video. It has a little bit of a rough edge on in between each crimp, so I'm sure a little sandpaper would be a good idea on that, but I don't see why that wouldn't do the job. It's better than running over to some place to have them do it for me, because I'm pretty lazy. I like to just stay in the shop. So that's one down, and I'll do the other one. Alright, let's test it out and see how it fits. Something like that. Okay, well, I had to take it out of there. It was pretty tight. Getting it onto that stock tubing. So that looks better. I think there should be plenty of room for the air conditioner, which I plan on putting in hopefully before the summer. Yeah, that's better. It wouldn't even shut the hood before because this was 4 inches higher, you know. So that was totally worth the effort. And I was kind of afraid to try to do the crimping and the beading edge, but that was super easy. I don't think it took 5 minutes to do both those pipes. So on to the next side. Okay, from here I'm trying to show you where the intercooler piping, or the turbo to intercooler piping, comes through. So this is actually the coolant line, and it passes in between the coolant and the sway bar. So it just passes on through and then makes it around there. So it's got a lot of connections, but that looks like it'll work, I guess. I don't know. I'm new to turbo. Okay, now this is on after the intercooler, and this pipe, I'd mentioned this before, comes in contact with our aftermarket radiator. So when it goes down, we had two options: one to go between the sway bar and the radiator, or to go after the sway bar. And down here on the side, you can see this right here is the stock piece, and it comes around and loops up. It has a few bends in it, but it actually looks like it's set up to go behind the sway bar, and I might buy a different U-piece like I did on the other side and change this later. But for now, I think I'm just going to leave it because, you know, it's a decent piece and everything, and it gets it where it needs to go. So for now, I think I'll just leave it there and see how it goes. All right, I hope you guys can hear me okay. I forgot my Bluetooth mic today, but what I'm going to do is install the drain line into the oil pan of the Miata here. And so what I've rigged up, and I got this information off Flying Miata on their big turbo kit, but what they recommend doing is pressurizing the valve cover with like 5 psi air pressure from your air hose. So what I'm going to do is I've got that set up, and I'm going to drill a hole in the oil pan, and with this pressure hopefully all the particles will fall out so nothing goes inside. So we'll see how it goes. So what I've got rigged up here is just this tubing that goes to the valve cover, and it's just got a air compressor fitting on it, just, you know, for blasting out stuff. And then I'm just going to use some vice grips to hold it in the on position so it's pressurized, so it'll blow out any metal particles while I do this. So you can see I've already got the hole started here, and I'm going to start with a small bit and work my way up to a larger one. Okay, we've got the air on, and you're supposed to be very careful not to go in too far, so I'm going to make sure I don't have too much pressure on it. Okay, so I've got grease on the tip of my drill bit as an added measure to make sure it hopefully doesn't have any metal shavings drop in there. I'm going to turn the air on and drill the final hole. They recommend turning it up to 10 psi when you get to the larger diameter hole, so that's what it's at now. It started at 5. Okay, it's in there. I got it all tapped now. And on this NPT 3/8 fitting, I looked it up and they said when you reach the correct spot, you should have about 6 or 7 threads still showing on it. So that worked, and I still have the air running, which I'd have to say that actually worked really well to get the all the little particles to just come flying out. So I really had no signs of anything going into the motor. It saw a lot of things coming out of this hole, but nothing going in. So yeah, that's a win. So we'll put some sealant on that fitting and put it in there. Okay, so this is, whoops, let me get it in focus there. Anyway, this is the hole. It's basically 2 inches below the top edge of the pan, and as far front on the oil pan as you can get, and make sure you don't go in too far. They say to put some tape or something on the drill bit to ensure you don't get in there and accidentally get a hold of the pickup on the oil tube or the oil pickup. I did end up having to take it in a couple more threads than what I just said on that tap, because it would only go in like maybe 2.5 threads, so I wasn't comfortable with that and tapped it a little more. So now I've got some ultra black RTV sealant and gasket maker stuff, and I've got all the threads coated, not too much so it doesn't get in the oil pan. tighten it up and let it dry. So this is how that looks from above. Got nice access to it, and it should join right up to the turbo quite well. Okay, so next up is going to be the sending unit for the oil to the turbo. And we're going to tap into where the oil pressure sending unit is. And so I need to pull that off, and then I'll show you kind of how you assemble the T and everything to access it. So that'll be next. It's going to be located, it's kind of hard to get to, so this video is not going to show any of that, but there's it's right here. It's got a, I forget what size it is, but it's pretty big. It's like a 22 millimeter or something like that to pull that sending unit off. So that's where you'll find it. I found it easiest to access that sending unit from the bottom, just behind the wheel. Get up under here. I was able to get a ratchet on it quite easily, and it's a 29 millimeter that was on this car. Okay, sending units out. Mine was a 29 millimeter, and so originally this went into the block, and what we're going to add is this fitting into the block, then the T on that. We'll add the sending unit here, and then this will give us access to oil to feed the turbo. Okay, I got the oil sending unit all set up. I had a custom line made that I've got tied in here. It's going to go to the turbo, so that's the oil feed. We've got the drain down there to fill back into the oil pan. I have the turbo and the manifold and everything off. On that, what has been done since the last time I shot a video was I have these banjo lines that came up, and anyway, I've got the cooling set up to go there. This is the oil drain, and then over here on this side is where the oil feed's going to come in. And the stock coolant inlet is a problem, so it goes here, and where this elbow is now, I had it cut, and let me see if I can move this over here so you can see. Anyway, this elbow used to point out here, and it was about this much longer, which it ran right into the turbo. So I cut this down and took about an inch and a quarter out of it, and rotated it down. So now when it's on there, it won't come in interference with the turbo. So now I think I'm going to put that turbo back on. That turned out pretty good. So I've got it installed here, and this elbow used to be out here, and it would come off this direction sideways towards the driver's side wheel, but now it goes down. So it just barely clears the motor, and that's good. So, okay, now that we've got this all installed, I'm going to put the exhaust manifold and the turbo back on. This piece actually will go up in here, something like that, and then I think after that I'm pretty excited, because I'm pretty sure the next step will be running the oil lines and the cooling lines to the turbo. The exhaust manifold, one of the bolts was broken off from the previous guy on where it goes down to the exhaust, so I'm going to weld a nut to it and see if I can get it out. We'll see how it goes. So welded that nut on there. It's hot as hell, so I'm not going to touch it, but it's coming out. That's a great way to go. Guy that works on my cars showed me that trick. Okay, so hopefully this will go back in nice and smooth. Oops. Nice. So that cooling line will go over there, and then this one will drop into there. Cool. I'll bolt it up. Okay, so that's the cooling line. That's that part that I had on the water inlet to the motor. You can see it just barely, let's see if I can get down here, barely clears everything. Okay, so now this is the one of the water lines for the turbo to cool it. If you go to a quality hose supplier, there's good clamps and everything there. Instead of like AutoZone. AutoZone has shitty clamps. Snug this manifold up. Very nice. Alright, so I've got the line coming, or the pipe coming from the turbo outlet going down. Goes around to the intercooler like it should. On this side, I did modify the pipe right here, because you may have seen it in the other videos before this one, but anyway, it came and it dropped down, went like this, and then it turned and went up, and so I just took that bend out of it and used these stock pieces. So the next thing I'm going to take on is, there's two things. I think this is like for the cold air start. I'm gonna have to actually make a hole on the other side of this and weld a nipple on there so I can connect that line. But today I'm going to take out the injectors and replace them with Mazda Speed injectors. Okay, I started taking this apart, and I forget what size these are. I think they're 12 millimeters, but anyway, there's 3 12s across here that loosens up the fuel rail. Now, if I were to recommend doing this first, I would disconnect all of these. I ended up having to tighten it back up because they're just too loose on the injectors. So get all of those off, and I've never done this before, so I don't really know what to expect, but it doesn't have any fuel pressure I saw over here, and the battery's been disconnected for a few weeks, so we'll see what happens here in a second. There's no pressure. So get those out, and then we'll get the ones off the turbo Miata on. Very nice.
It was just like something magical happened. It was like lightning pop, no question about it. But Rockstar gave Shannon license to be even more self-confident. It wasn't just about Kurt. It's questioning himself, questioning his demons. He felt that kind of pain. He was fighting that fight.
All right. Just get the fuel rail back on there and get all those to line up. See, that doesn't look like it's going to be too bad.
Taking action against his own in May of '92, he entered a 30.
I'm getting pretty excited. This thing's not too far from being finished. I'm going to have to go through and put check valves, I think, on almost all of these vacuum lines to protect them from the boost. But I don't know. I'm going to have to look into that a little bit more. Injectors installed. Yay! So the next thing, I've already plugged it in, but the Miata Link. And this actually is already attached to the cover that is right here. So this should be pretty easy. And nice. Then it has a knock sensor that I need to install. And then this goes to the intake vacuum line. So that's that half of the Miata Link. This is under the floorboard on the passenger side. And I've already started taking this out, but this is the computer, and I have the other one that's all set up to go with that Miata Link system. So it's just a couple bolts holding it in. Out with the old. Sure hope all this shit works being used. He said it did. But, and then this has the engine management on it, so we'll see how all that old school stuff works. Usually when I do something, I kind of do things one thing at a time so I can test it along the way, and that way if I make a mistake, I can know where I did it. This is going to be a little different because we're replacing all kinds of shit. Apparently a smoker owned this car before. Nice. I'm not sure exactly where I'll put this, but we'll find a spot for it. Okay, since I shot the last video, a couple things have come up. That Miata Link engine management that I was going to use, I wouldn't recommend it after what I know now. The Miata Link it's not supported no longer, and there's no way you can get parts for it. And one of the air metering sensor or the temperature sensor was bad, and I could not get a replacement. And it's not like it's an off-the-shelf type sensor, so they've gone out of business. So since then, I got with Flying Miata. I talked to them quite a bit, and they have a FM 221 computer. It's their in-house stuff. I bought one of those. The other thing is this used to be a chrome piece, and I had, because of the oversized radiator, a problem with it, but they make a silicone one, which is a much snugger fit, which makes it so there's room for everything. So that's been replaced, and the computer I'm in the middle of replacing now. So that's why it looks different. So since the last video, I've replaced this piece and the computer. Okay, so we had a little situation where the ECU that I got with this whole budget build turbo kit thing turned out to be a piece of shit. And it doesn't work, so I had to go and spend a bunch of money, so it's taken a minute for me to get to this point, and I was a little frustrated with the situation, so I stopped recording. But where we've got to at this point is I've got it running, and I can kind of go through and just point out the things that I did off camera. Let me put it that way. So let me scoot this a little closer. And so since the last video I recorded, I do believe I've added this component. I had a Flying Miata one for the MSM Mazda Speed Miata that went here, and because of this aftermarket oversized radiator, these kind of interfered with each other. I went through Flying Miata and picked up this silicone tube that just made everything so much easier and made everything clear. I did have to do some minor changes to the plumbing from the intercooler to the throttle body to make that fit, but it wasn't too big of a deal. The other thing we've done is I've added this oil catch can. On the catch can here, it's a Moroso. That also was from Flying Miata. And over here on the right, I put in the turbo boost controller. So basically this is just going to go from the, I forget what this is called, the breather tube there that normally would go to the intake, and this oil cooler, or not oil cooler, oil catch can is in line. And then I made this little nipple here with a bung that goes into the intake. Also, the cold air intake up front here. I don't know if I'll keep it there. I might try to use the cowl induction that this has eventually, but at this point I'm just happy to have that all in place. So that's that. Over here, a couple things. Okay, As far as, let's see, what do we got going on here? Oh yeah, so that line goes down to the, um, okay, yeah, sorry. So I had to wire in this. This goes to the air temperature or density um, sensor, and you take that and go over and feed it into what was the airflow meter on the other side. So there's two leads that you have to tie in on that. I think it's number 1 and number 5. Mine's a 7 pin, or number 1 and number 6. Mine is a 7-pin plug, but I think they also have a 3 and 5-pin plug, so it's year specific on that. And then I had to put in this check valve going to the fuel evaporator, and also had to change out the check valve that goes into this. This is off of a 88 Mazda 3 GTX, I think is what it's called. But anyway, it came boosted, so that one's able to handle the boost a little better. This originally, let's see, what did that go to? Oh yeah, originally this went to the fuel pressure regulator. I teed off that to feed the ECU as well as the boost gauge inside the cab. And um, the ECU was pretty easy to install, actually. It wasn't bad at all. You definitely have to drill some holes and a couple things, but it wasn't bad at all. I have done an initial startup, and that's about where I'm at right now. It ran a little rough. I had a couple exhaust leaks. I seem to have got that taken out of the way. And now I'm going to take it off jack stands and go put it in auto tune mode and see what it can learn.